the three things that are likely preventing you from cash flowing consistently in your business. Okay. And they're super, super important. And I come from a project management background, and in project management work, there's some phrasing that's called critical path. And basically, what critical path is when you're looking at an actual project plan or a strategy or a roadmap or a blueprint or whatever the case may be, fill in the blank of whatever makes the most sense to you. When you're looking at that plan, you have things to do, right? Tasks to execute. Some are done sequentially. It's linear, like first I do this and then I do that. They're interdependent of one another, and you do one after the other after the other. There are other things that you can do that are in parallel to one another, which means basically you can do this while also doing this at the same time. Pretty self-explanatory there. Critical path is basically the steps within that blueprint that you have to go through in order to reach your end goal. Okay, so there are other things that could happen in parallel. Some things need to happen in parallel, but also sequentially in order to deliver that end product or that goal or whatever the case is. But that is the critical path. And so some things are on that list and some things aren't. They need to happen, but it's not absolutely critical for them to happen. Hopefully that makes sense. The critical path for recruiting go through these three things. The most of the folks that I talk to and that I work with are usually short in at least one, if not all three, and not putting them all together, which is preventing them from cash flowing in their business. And I would say out of the gate as a solo recruiter, at a minimum, you should be cash flowing consistently between $20,000 and $50,000 a month in and month out. That's not ceiling. That's like just, I would say, average in my opinion. But you can't get there and you can't achieve that unless you do those three things. And so let me pull up my chat here because I'm going to drop some of this stuff in the chat as I talk, because I like to do that. So here are the three things. So I'm going to list them out and then I'm going to deep dive on each one of them. All right. So the first one, which we talked a little bit last week, is your technology. Okay. Second one is the science of recruiting. And the third one is the art of recruiting. Okay. These three things. Now, I'm going to give you some color behind that and some detail about each one, but you have to be able to take all three of these components and put them together to deliver the consistency and the profits that we're talking about here. So you can't just have one and expect consistency and profitability in your business. You can't have two, you got to have all three. Okay. They're all interrelated and they're all part of this critical path that we're on to get consistent and stable cash flow month in and month out. So let's talk about the technology, the tech. And so basically, obviously we got to have technology in this business to be able to do what we do. We need it on the business development side of our business. We also need it on the candidate fulfillment side. But the key points within the technology is obviously outside of, are you using the right platforms? Do you have your inboxes set up? That's a spoiler. I'm not going to break any news by telling you that. But what I am going to talk about here as far as the technology is, do you have the right outbound strategy? I'm going to drop this in the chat. So outbound strategy on both sides of the fence, our business development and our fulfillment side, our recruiting, right? And so what do I mean by that? Do you have the right cadence? Do you have the frequency set correctly in your cadence? Do you have the right target market, right? Are you targeting the right industries and business development? Are you targeting the right candidates? Are you manipulating filters within the search tools that you're using to be able to target the right candidates that you need to reach out to? Are you using Boolean strings? Do you know what Boolean strings are? Are you super educated on it, or you just know enough to kind of be dangerous? So that's a big part of it, the outbound strategy. What are you currently doing? Do you have that dialed in? Do you know what you're doing? Do you have a system that is proven, or are you just kind of guessing at it and trying to see what works? Obviously, if it's the latter, that's not going to give you the consistency that we're talking about. Another thing as it relates to the technology, your copy, any copy that you're doing, really, whether that be your cold email copy, again, on the client side or on the candidate sourcing side, your messaging needs to resonate with people. You got to be able to get eyeballs and get people that are interested and care about what you have to say. If you don't have that dialed in, if you don't know exactly what works and what doesn't, again, you're not going to have that consistency as far as the profits with it that you see within your business. Same thing on the candidate outreach. If you don't know how to connect with people via the internet or really via text message or any other channel that you might be using, same thing. You're just kind of shooting in the dark, you're guessing at it, and hopefully it works, hopefully it doesn't, and that's not a solid strategy. And then kind of piggybacking on cold email copy within the tech bucket, subject lines, the subject lines that you're using in cold email to get people's attention, to get those eyeballs. Are you layering in enough personalization, or are your subject lines screaming that this is spam, or I'm trying to sell you something, or whatever the case may be, the things that turn people off? Do you have that dialed in? So on the technology side, that's really, there's a lot in there to unpack, but aside, and then you got to get into, right, obviously the tools that you're using and this sort of thing. So that's a huge part of it as well, but there's more meat and potatoes to it than just picking the right subscription to sign up for. So the second thing, so let's get into the second bucket here, the science of recruiting. So recruiting is kind of a crazy animal because there are metrics and benchmarks literally in almost everything that we do, that if we know what those benchmarks are, we know the output and the inputs to those outputs and how to manipulate them. Truthfully, if you're running your business right, if you're covering the art of recruiting, which we're going to talk about here in a second, if all of those things are firing right and you have the tech set up correctly, it's almost like a math equation. It really is, and that's kind of what I've seen in my business. I can pick a revenue target at a high level and then literally take that dollar figure and back into everything else in my business to be able to deliver that with a certain level of certainty. And so, understanding what those numbers are and the inputs to those numbers. And when I say inputs, I'm talking about the operational things that you do, the actions that you take, the things that you do or don't do, what you focus on or don't focus on within your business that manipulate those numbers. You got to know what those are. Those are your inputs, okay? And so there are benchmarks and science on both sides of the fence, just like on the tech side and just like there will be on the art side, that you need to track and know what those benchmarks are. And benchmarks are important. Why? Because it tells us whether we're doing good or not, okay? If you don't have that benchmark and you're just tracking numbers to track numbers, you don't know whether that's good or not. Am I doing okay? Am I not doing okay? Am I overperforming? Am I underperforming? Am I going to reach this revenue target? Am I going to hit it this month? Am I going to hit it next month? Am I going to hit it the month after that? Those are things that are super, super important. And so on the science side and on the business development side, within the metrics that we like to track, you need to know, obviously, one, the big one is going to be your positive reply to email sent ratio, right? Got to know that one. From there, you got to know how many calls you're going to book out of that positive reply. Calls booked. From there, you got to know how many agreements are going to get signed. And then finally, of the agreements that you sign, how many placements are you making? Super, super important. And I can't spell still, but you get the point there. And then conversely, on the other side, on the fulfillment side, you got to know how much candidate outreach should I be doing? How many screenings should I be doing a week? How many submissions? And then, there we go, submissions. And then finally, how many placements is that going to yield? Obviously, everything needs to end at a placement because that's how we make money. how placements, that's supposed to be how many placements. So obviously, so those are the funnels and the metrics that you need to be tracking, but you need to know where to start, how many you're sending, what's good, what's bad, to deliver those results, and make sure that you're executing day in and day out within your business to deliver the outputs that we're looking for. The other reason that metrics and the science of recruiting is so dang important is because it gives you the visibility within your business from a data-driven standpoint to know when things are all of a sudden not going correctly. Okay, because that will happen. Stuff happens, right? In this life, we're living in real life, and so nothing goes in a straight line, and nothing is perfect. Things are going to screw up. There's going to be issues. There's going to be shifts in your market. There might be shifts in your organization, etc. And so the only way you know for sure that shift is occurring as proactively and as soon as possible is going to be through these numbers. And so if you're not tracking them and you don't know what the benchmarks are, you don't know what's good, you don't know what's not good, you're going to be flying blind. And so this is also where I see actually both new recruiters, people that are just starting out, and folks that have been up and running for a while that have seen some success, but they can't put it together in a consistent way, where they really seem to miss the mark. Because they don't have the ability to see when things start going sideways so that they can get in before it becomes a huge issue within their business, get in where the issue is, investigate, triage, and get back on track. If you don't know what those numbers are, you're not going to have that visibility. You're not going to know there's a problem until all of a sudden you're not hitting your revenue targets probably a couple months in a row. And all of a sudden, if you wait till that point, it's a huge problem, right? It's catastrophic. So science is super, super, super important. And then from there, we'll get into, let's talk a little bit about the art of recruiting. So the art of recruiting is the human side, the emotional side of this business. And so I know we've talked a lot about, kind of quantitative stuff as far as the science of recruiting and even the technology to a certain extent, but don't get it twisted. This is a people business. This is a business based on relationships and making connections with people and building rapport and earning trust and developing long-term partnerships. The art of recruiting is the glue that makes those numbers that we just discussed in the science of recruiting work, okay? So if you don't have the art of recruiting down and you're not able to connect with people and build long-lasting relationships and have your counterparts within your clients and candidates, have them consistently in a place where they're looking forward to hearing from you, or they like working with you, or they see your name pop up in their inbox and they get excited and they're anxious to see what you're sending them. And that, if you don't have that, you're not going to deliver this stable consistency. You're going to have this volatility because people aren't going to be in it with you for the long haul. They're going to be in it for the short run and see what you do. Maybe you deliver, maybe you don't, but it's always going to be short term and short lived. And so this is also incredibly important, and obviously a big reason why this is part of our critical path to that stability and to that month in, month out earnings of 20 to 50K a month. All right. So you need to really ask yourself within the processes of your business and how you're executing on both sides, both the business development side and the fulfillment side. How am I strategically and systematically building that rapport? How am I making that connection? Am I just kind of going into each conversation with like a good attitude and a smile on my face and hoping for the best? Again, that's not going to, that ain't going to get it done. I hate to break it to you. It's just not. That's not real world. You need to have a strategy. You need to have a system, something that is repeatable that you can do, whether you're talking to Mona or whether you're talking to Pam, right? The delivery, the messaging, and hopefully the output is the same consistently every time you talk to somebody. And it shouldn't matter whether you are talking to a client or talking to a candidate. You should still be making that connection, okay? And building that rapport. Another huge piece of the art of, and Gail in the chat, you can't sound like a used car salesman with your applicants. Yeah, absolutely. That's going to turn people off and create some distrust, right? But another huge piece, and this is I mean, we could do just an hour discussion on this alone, which we do quite often in the mastermind and elite groups. But a huge piece of the art of recruiting is, how am I strategically in my conversations with my clients and my candidates uncovering, at least on the client side, where is their pain as it relates to this open role? How am I getting them to give me that information so that, one, I can assess whether this is worth my time or not? Because remember what we talked about last week, the landmines that'll put you out of business, time wasters, tire kickers. How do I have a conversation with somebody, a decision maker within an organization who barely knows me? How do I build that rapport quickly and in a systematic, strategic way, ask them questions to get them to pull back their curtain and tell me whether this is super high priority in their organization, like, hey, we're not going to hit revenue targets in our company if we don't fill this role, or it's kind of whatever, right? It's just because Jim wants another engineer in the department. You have to be able to do that, because if you're not able to have those conversations and navigate that strategically, you're not going to have that intel. And so again, here you are yet in another situation where you're just kind of hoping for the best and flying blind. Again, that's not going to get it done. You cannot do that and expect to make money in this thing over the long term consistently. It's just not going to happen. And then on the candidate side, how do you jump on the phone with somebody and literally within your first conversation, your first real conversation, get them to tell you the pain about their current situation and what sucks about their life right now as it relates to their work? A lot of people come in with a guard up and are not super like chomping at the bit to sit on your couch and spill their guts, right? You've got to be able to, again, build that connection, build that rapport, ask questions in a soft way, but in a way that builds trust and allows them to feel comfortable to share that information with you. And you have to have that information. Why is it important for the candidate? Similarly with clients, you need to know how serious they are about your opportunity. But then also beyond that, you need to have something that is going to hook them into your opportunity. And this is a spoiler alert. It can't always be money. All right. It can't always, because a lot of the roles that you're working are not going to have a massive pay jump from what your candidates are already making. So you need to have another way of getting people excited about what you're recruiting for. And so you got to have a strategy around that. You got to have some knowledge on how to navigate those conversations, ask those questions to get those answers flowing, and do it in a way where you're not turning people off, where they feel like they can trust you and they're actually listening to someone who cares and can help them. Okay, super, super, super important. Beyond all of that, with both the candidate and the client, this type of information is absolutely essential later down the road in the fulfillment process. And anybody that has recruited for 5 minutes in this industry knows that one of the things that plagues us all is lowball offers. Okay. I had one literally yesterday. We got the client to accept, but we had one, or the candidate to accept, but we had one. And it happens literally all the time. And so when you get a lowball offer, when you go into that situation, again, are you just like, oh God, okay, well, hopefully my candidate just takes it, you know? I mean, I don't know what to tell him. Like, hopefully he or she is just cool with it and, you know, it works out. That's not going to get it done. That's not a strategy. That's not something real that is going to deliver placements and ultimately cash flow. Okay. And so if you have the ability to pull that information that we talked about a minute ago from both your clients and your candidates about their pain, about their current work situation, or with the client, why this role is important for them to fill. If you have that information, when they come in with a lowball offer, now you have something to work with that you can work both sides of the fence to get an agreement and move them across the finish line. Okay. So on the client side, if you know it's important to them and you know it's a huge deal, hey, listen, Mr. and Mrs. Client, really remember you're telling me like you're not going to hit your revenue target this year if you don't have this role filled, and could mean potential mass layoffs in your organization. Like, is it really worth an extra $5K to Bob down here, who is basically almost taking a pay cut already to come over to your organization, but he's excited about the new work-life balance that he's getting. Like, come on, really? And then conversely on the other side, hey Bob, listen, I just want to prep you for this. I don't know for sure, but this offer might, they're definitely going to offer you, but might come in a little light. And I don't want that to scare you because, listen, it's not a lot of money, really. 5K over, 12 months after taxes, we're talking about a few $100 a month. It's not going to change your life one way or the other. But what is going to change your life is getting that time back with your family, right? It's going to strengthen your marriage. You're going to get more time with your kids. So I just want to prep you for that. I don't know for sure if the offer is going to come in at that number, but I'm kind of hearing some things. So I just want to proactively. So now I have a strategy where I can work both sides, and hopefully the client comes in with a legit offer, but oftentimes they don't. And if they don't, I've got a plan over here. Bob's already prepped. I've got his mindset where I want it, so that we're increasing the likelihood that we get a yes and we get an invoice. Okay. And so again, that doesn't come with just a good attitude and a smile on your face. You got to have a strategy. You got to have some knowledge. You got to have some game on how to do that every time. It's got to be systematic. And so if it's not, again, you're not going to get the sustainability and the consistency in your profits month in and month out. And so that's why all three of those things, and hopefully I did an okay job of explaining why each one of those is absolutely critical to deliver what we're talking about here, that at minimum 20 to 50K a month each month. If one of those things is missing, it ain't going to happen. You got a landmine that you're stepping on, and it's going to prevent you from getting, you're going to have a couple months where you're not getting it, or maybe you have a stretch, a quarter or two where you're not getting it. And so, but if you have these three things put together, this gives you the most certainty that it will happen. Okay. And you're doing it from a systematic way. You're doing it from a data-driven standpoint, and you're doing it because you know it works. Okay. Which is super, super important. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. That's kind of the talking point for the Friday Live. Listen, we have two programs here, the Elite and the Mastermind group. We cover all three of these things in depth in both groups and other stuff. So if you are someone sitting there saying to yourself, like, yeah, that's me. Maybe I make a placement, 1 month, but then I go 2 months without one, or I have 3 placements 1 month and then I go a quarter without making one. It doesn't have to be that way. Come into our group. Let us teach you how this works. Let us show you how to do it. It's proven. I live and breathe it every day in my own business. And it's definitely worked for others. So book a call with Jen if she hasn't dropped her Calendly there. Book a call with her if you want to hear more. Would love to have you, but all in the group, obviously. So